Hi, this is Jack Downs with a little video about things we did in class on Thursday the 13th, November 13th. But also, I'm going to take that same lecture that I started there and continue it. So I'm hoping that everybody watches this video. You could watch the whole thing if you were in class on Thursday. You could watch the whole thing, and then it will include the end of that lecture, which you should have. You need to know because it's on the exam. Or you could just fast forward to where I begin the second part, which is about, using language vividly, the using language vividly section. Okay? We'll start with using language clearly. And of course, if you weren't in class, you should watch the entire thing. Also, know that we started the class, of course, with presentations, and then also with review of the outlining and getting everybody up to speed with outlining and doing one more complicated outlining example. So you need to get those handouts if you weren't in class, and you should practice outlining because that's on the exam also. First of all, this lecture about using language clearly. And these are some very basic ideas here, right? But they apply to spoken language and writing language. Applies to all of your writing, all your speaking. This is especially for writing, I would say, though, because we can take the time to edit and to plan things more carefully. First of all, use familiar words. Trying to sound important and professional can lead to what your textbook calls big bloated words. We don't want to sound bureaucratic. We don't want to sound artificial like a textbook. We want to shorten sentences and have simple logic. Vivid language is good, and we like interesting words, but we don't want to create a barrier to understanding, as it says here. But likewise, we don't want to create words that are just artificially complex. So, for example, this handout, by the way, that I'm reviewing is available as an attachment here. This is just a list of avoid these more complex words and use these more familiar words. All right. So, for instance, endeavor and try. We don't want to endeavor to do it. We're going to try to do it. We're not going to interface. We're going to meet or talk. We're not going to say it's erroneous. We're going to say it's wrong. You should look through that list and just look. There's probably a few words there that you tend to use. Maybe use approximately instead of about, right? So we sometimes throw words like that in, but there's no reason to. And if you read words like that, when simpler ones would work in your own writing, make sure to change it. The idea of using concrete words. Well, the concept here is to be specific and concrete. Remember in the exercise I did with you, or suggested that you do, where we took a series of words and we arranged them from the most general and abstract on one side to the most specific and concrete on the other. Well, you will have to do that on an exam, yes, but knowing that kind of continuum of words helps us pick better words, because we want to be more specific and we want to be more concrete. I like the word concrete because it suggests that it's a real thing you could really touch. We want our readers and our listeners to have the idea that we're talking about real things that they could touch, right? This is an example from your textbook. First, they begin with this more basic sentence. Asian carp have become a big problem. They grow to enormous size and eat a lot of food. Well, very true, but bland and very general, right? As opposed to saying Asian carp are one of the most destructive species in the United States, which they are. These voracious eaters. Now you may say, is that just an example of a complex word? We can use a simpler one? No, I think that's an example of vivid writing. These voracious eaters can devour 20% of their body weight a day. Because they grow to 100 pounds, their insatiable appetites are starving native fish of the food they need to survive. So our writing, when we get a lot more depth, a lot more facts, a lot more specifics, can become a lot more vivid. Now you may say to yourself, but yeah, aren't some of these words, as I said, maybe not really exactly familiar? Voracious, maybe not familiar. Insatiable, maybe not familiar. There is a tension, obviously, between familiar words and vivid words. We want to make sure that's okay to use vivid words, but we want to make sure we're not using. Instead of using a simple familiar word, we want to make sure we're not using something that's just bureaucratic and kind of textbook-like, right? So just a big word. That's the problem. And we want to watch out for vague pronoun use. This is not in your textbook, and as those of you who've had writing courses with me know, it is one of my pet peeves, is the words it and they. It and they are supposed to be in a sentence referring to something else that came in that sentence, came before them, right? I could say, my friends are going to see the movie. They are going out to dinner first. And they are going out to dinner first. So obviously now they refers to my friends. But if I start a sentence with they or with it, I don't know what it's referring to. So that was grammatically incorrect. Frequently, it and they are used incorrectly, and they shouldn't be used at all. They frequently shouldn't be used at all. They could be replaced. Imagine if I had written the sentence, they can devour 20% of their body weight a day. Many of you have written that in a series of description. Now, the description is good, but who is they? Oh, it should be obvious. It probably is obvious, but why am I doing that? Why am I giving you a word that has no other content? I would want to say, these voracious eaters. That's what they did in the text, these voracious eaters. So I find a better way to describe and add information and add vividness at the same time. So watch out when you're writing, when you do self-editing, watch out for it and they. Now the idea of eliminating clutter. It is easier said than done. We want to pull out meaningless phrases and words, repetition. We want to look for things that aren't helping us at all or just bogging the sentence down. It's a really useful exercise, but it takes time. It's actually, of course, harder to do on your own writing than it is an example I'm going to give you, but that's how it goes. Some things we can watch out for is watch out for directional words that aren't doing anything, like up and down are often added into phrases that don't help. How about the word different is one of my pet peeves also. That's a word we almost never use, never need to use. Just a moment. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, the word different. An example would be saying that he taught 3 different classes. Well, yeah, of course there were different classes. He taught 3 classes. Of course there were different classes. The word on with a day or a date is frequently not needed. The word that, as in he said that we will all pass this class. In other words, he said we will all pass this class. The word that is frequently not needed. It's sometimes a wasted word. Watch out for wordy, useless introductory clauses like I think or in my opinion. Just say it. Just say it. It wouldn't be your thought or your opinion if you hadn't put it in there. Of course it is. Strings of descriptors, hot, steamy, torrid, that'll be an example that we have. Sometimes we do repetition of. Now, if you're trying it for a literary effect and you want to intentionally use repetition, that can be useful. But just make sure it's not being accidentally and just wordy, making it wordy. Using language vividly, we'll get to that in a moment. In class, we did this exercise. I'm going to include the handout for you. That's not it. Where I gave everybody this this chunk of text and asked them in groups to rewrite it, to look for eliminating unnecessary words, for eliminating clutter. And I hope that you can do that. I'm going to suggest you pause here, go look at that, and then come back and watch me do it. I gave actually 2 groups of this stuff, these kind of faked problem little stories. And we did one in class, and we'll leave the other for people to do if they wish on their own. So I'm thinking you have paused this, now you're ready to begin. And let me show you what I would do. Imagine the thought of burning, excuse me. Wow, all these interruptions. Okay, here we go. Imagine the thought of burning up a priceless painting by Rembrandt just in order to stay warm for 10 minutes. That is a bloated sentence. Imagine the thought. In other words, imagine burning. Imagine the thought. We don't imagine thoughts. We just imagine. Imagine the thing. Imagine burning up. How about just burning a priceless painting by Rembrandt? How about a priceless Rembrandt? I think when we say Rembrandt, we know it is a painting. Or we could even just say a Rembrandt, and we know it would be priceless because Rembrandt is an extremely famous painter, I guess, right? But we could leave it like that. We can, of course, when you're removing clutter, sometimes you can remove too much and make a sentence just completely compact and dense. When you need to have a little air sometimes in sentences, but imagine burning a priceless Rembrandt just in order to. Well, we know that in order to is almost always removed. Just to stay warm? How about, I should have left to, but how about to stay warm for 10 minutes? Or we could just say just to stay warm and forget the 10 minutes if we thought that was not needed. Sounds really crazy? Sounds crazy. Really, words like that, we feel like when we say them and write them, we're kind of like adding emphasis and adding, size and weight. But honestly, sounds crazy has as much impact, or maybe even a little more, than just throwing other words on top of it, like really. But that is comparable to just what is happening right now in the Amazon rainforests of Brazil. All right, another bloated sentence. We don't have to say it's comparable. We could just say that is what is happening. We can make this into a metaphor instead of a simile. But that is what is happening, not just what is happening, what is happening. But that is, in fact, but we could just say that is happening right now in the Amazon rainforest of Brazil. The president of Brazil, in the Amazon rainforest of Brazil, well, we could just say in the Amazon, or in the Amazon rainforest, or we could say the rainforest of Brazil, but I don't think we need all of that. We could probably just say the Amazon rainforest. Although it would be okay to say, well, we're going to get into Brazil in just a moment anyway. We see that in the next sentence, so we don't really need that. We could just say the Amazon, but I could say Amazon rainforest. Good. The president of Brazil. Whenever I see something like that, I know it's Brazil's president. Brazil's president. Authorized, you could get rid of the word authorized, but I'm going to leave it there for now. A 14,000-mile network. How about 14,000 miles of highway? Not a network of highways, just highways, because that is its own, it is become a network. 14,000 miles of highways. To open up, just to open. Vast areas of the rainforest. How about open the vast rainforest to settlement? Good. Now we have the word unfortunately. When you begin a sentence with unfortunately, you are actually telling the reader they should feel something. It's much better just to tell them and let them feel. So unfortunately, we'll get rid of that. We could say it. And here we have one of those vague its we should not have. What? It's starting a sentence essentially, right? We could say, what is it we're talking about? The project or the road building has been nothing but a disaster. Has been a disaster has more impact than throwing other words in its way. Has been a disaster from the very beginning. How about just from the beginning? Very beginning and beginning are the same thing. Working in the hot, torrid, steamy. Again, this is an example of throwing other descriptors on top. That really mean the same thing. Working in the steamy jungle. Torrid would be fine also. Even hot would be fine. Steamy jungle. Working in the steamy jungle caused many fatal deaths. Well, of course, deaths are always fatal. That's just repetition. Caused deaths among the workers. We could just say caused many worker deaths. How about that? We could even shorten up even more like that. We could say caused many worker deaths. So soon, but I will leave it like this. We'll leave a little air in there. Soon, a whole lot of different foreign businesses began to get themselves involved in the project. Wow, that's a bloated sentence. Soon, a whole lot of different businesses. Of course, they were different businesses, right? Soon, foreign businesses. Soon, foreign businesses began to get themselves involved. No, how about something simple we have to replace it with? How about foreign businesses joined in the project or joined the project? Today, there's a very real danger. Today, there is a danger. I think, in fact, we get a very and real. Today there is a danger that the rainforest will be irrevocably destroyed. First of all, completely and altogether. Destroyed already is completely and altogether. In fact, I would argue, question whether we need irrevocably. That means it could never be rebuilt. But maybe it's doing some work there. So is that shorter? Wow, that is shorter. That's the process of limiting clutter. The same process I hope that you go through with your text that you write for essays and papers and whatever, to try to self-edit. Certainly, if you're writing journalism, for me, this is the work you should do to self-edit. I'll be back in just a moment. And this is what I wanted to show you. This is all the stuff we took out and little bits of stuff we added. So a significant amount that we determined that we did not need. All right, let's continue then. And now we're going to move on to the question of using language vividly. So this is the area I did not discuss last class. I may not get to in class, so I'm hoping you'll watch this video. So using language vividly. So we use these tools, which this is kind of like harkens back to probably your middle school English classes where you went over some of this stuff, and probably all of this, and in high school again probably. So these are not new ideas, but we want to remember that in our writing, in essay writing, in journalism, and certainly in feature writing in journalism, and then also even in essays for classes and so on, and in all your writing, you should consider literary devices that add life and vibrancy and vivid details. In imagery is critically important in all kinds of writing. We want to describe with concrete words, real things that we can touch, so on and so forth. I have a piece of example I want to read you for that. Hold on. This is a text. This is a piece from text from your textbook on page 220, I believe it is, depending on what edition you have, under imagery, under concrete words. This is a little chunk of a speech from Ronald Reagan. I'm not going to read the entire excerpt even. I'll read just a little bit, and we can imagine how the words will bring us there using imagery. We stand on a lonely, windswept point on the northern shore of France. The air is soft. But 40 years ago at this moment, the air was dense with smoke and the cries of men, and the air was filled with the crack of rifle fire and the roar of cannon. And it goes on to describe D-Day. And it was a speech from Ronald Reagan, extremely well-written one also. So I really encourage you to go read that. It's a great example of concrete words used to really add vivid language. Simile is using like or as. Comparison between things that are essentially different but common in some way, and by comparing them we add meaning, and we add another whole level of meaning to our sentences. But remember, simile must have like or as. Here's an example from a textbook I'm using in a class this semester in outdoor writing. It's from an Outside magazine story by Ian Fraser. The story is called Keeping America's Trees Safe from Small Curd Bubble Wrap. Quite a title. Here is the very short excerpt. The air was like something a dry cleaner would do to a stain when all milder measures had failed. So the air was like, wasn't that, but it was like something a dry cleaner would do to a stain when all milder measures had failed. That is a good use of simile. And you can find similes lots of places, and I hope you use them in your writing, and you can use them in your speech too. Metaphor. Metaphor is an implicit comparison, whereas simile is explicit. It's like, this thing is like that. Metaphor is implicit. It's implied. We were just saying that something is something else, right? Comparison between things that are essentially different but have something in common. It does not use like or as, right? So you have in your textbook a number of examples. Here are a couple of them from some famous pieces of work. This is from Lord of the Flies by William Golding, which many of you may have read in high school. And if you didn't, you should go read it. It's a great book. I've reread it not long ago. The sun in the west was a drop of burning gold that slid nearer and nearer the sill of the world. Just a wonderful piece of text. There's many other examples in your textbook of metaphor, where we say the sun in the west was a drop of burning gold. Well, since I mentioned metaphor, I'll mention something that is not in your textbook, but it's going to be on the exam, the idea of mixed metaphor. Mixed metaphor is a combination of two or more incompatible metaphors. Like, they don't work well together. They don't make sense together. But we're used to using them in different ways correctly, and then we join them accidentally or intentionally for a comic effect. It is a ridiculous effect. So, for instance, you could say, he was a bull in a glass house. Okay, we know bull in a china shop is one thing. Don't throw rocks in a glass house is another thing. Combining those together, we say he was a bull in a glass house. We could say, wake up and smell the writing on the wall. That would be another mixed metaphor. How about rhythm? Oops, where are we? Rhythm. And rhythm reminds me of a writing instructor we had in magazine writer who's still writing for a number of sports sites. Luke Cyphers. Luke had students sometimes write while listening to jazz. The unexpected changes in melody and rhythm, the syncopation, can really relate to writing. We want our writing to have a rhythm, and then have that rhythm change and keep people off guard, and add that rhythmic information to your writing. We have short, clipped, rapid sentences can build tension, but long, slow, leisurely ones can relax us and soothe us. And when we talk about rhythm in writing and in speech, here are 4 things we can do. We can do parallelism, which is a similar arrangement of a pair of series of related words or phrases or sentences. An example. So similar arrangement of a pair or pairs of or a series of related words or phrases. How about this from a very famous speech? I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Color of their skin, content of their character. That's a similar arrangement of a series of related words, and it is parallelism. How about this one from actually another civil rights leader I just heard was just in the hospital, Jesse Jackson. Today, students can put dope in their veins or hope in their brains. If they can conceive and believe it, they can achieve it. They must know it is not their aptitude, but their attitude that will determine their altitude. So we've got dope in their veins, hope in their brains, parallelism. We've got conceive it, believe it, achieve it, parallelism. We've got aptitude, attitude, altitude, parallelism. Isn't there rhyming in there also? Sure there is. There are other, these things have a number of features. We can have repetition, we could call it also. And repetition is the next one. But I think this is more obviously parallelism. Repetition is intentional repetition of a word or group of words. Now, normally in our writing, that's something we'd look for and we'd remove as clutter. But sometimes it's done for literary effect. Again, from a textbook I'm using, sorry, not textbook, but a book of magazine stories I'm using this semester in outdoor writing. There's a famous writer, Thomas McGuane, who wrote a story called Heart of the Game, and he writes this. We crept around looking into basins, and at dusk met a tired cowboy on a tired horse, followed by a tired blue heeler hound. That repetition, tired and tired and tired, almost makes us feel tired. So that's the effect that he's looking for. And then there's alliteration. Alliteration is repeating the initial consonant sounds of close or adjoining words. William Shakespeare in Macbeth writes, fair is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. Fair, foul, foul, fair, fog, filthy. Those are all the start with the same initial consonant sound, and they're all in the same sentence. That is definitely alliteration. Alliteration, a little bit goes a long way. See, alliteration can become too much in your writing if you use too much of it. And then antithesis is juxtaposing contrasting ideas, usually in parallel structure. So the opening of Charles Dickens' famous A Tale of Two Cities would be, it was the best of time, it was the worst of time. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was a season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going directly to heaven, we were all going directly the other way. It's nothing but antithesis. One thing and the opposite thing. One thing and the opposite thing. Is it best of times? It was the worst of times. That's antithesis. And then finally, using language appropriately. This is in your textbook and definitely applies to presentations. Another way to think about using language. Is it appropriate to the occasion? Or you're speaking at a wedding, a political event, a dinner for teammates. What is the occasion? The words have to match the occasion. Is it appropriate to the audience? Are you speaking to young people, old people, a church group, your friends? The audience matters. Is it appropriate to the topic? Some language is more appropriate to, or for a technical or how-to topic as opposed to an emotional topic. Is it appropriate to the speaker? You have your own style, and it's good to be yourself and have words that you use in your writing and in your presentations. Okay, so that is my run through. We will have a worksheet on this using language vividly in our next class.